Do you ever wonder who teaches a child to read when no one else will? For 11 years, Lorraine Beauchamp drove 40 minutes each way to a school that couldn't afford to keep its library open past 3 o'clock. She was not a teacher. She was not a volunteer. She was the woman who mopped the floors and wiped down the chalkboards and made sure the pencil shavings got emptied before the morning bell rang. But every Tuesday and Thursday after her shift ended and before the last bus came, she sat at the corner table in that library with whatever child happened to still be there, and she read with them. She never told anyone she was doing it. She never asked for recognition. She just showed up. She had no idea that one of those children was the son of the most powerful woman in the province of Ontario. Lorraine had grown up in Sudbury, the second oldest of 5 children in a household where money was something other people had. Her father worked the mines for 22 years before his lungs gave out. Her mother cleaned houses in the south end of the city. The kinds of houses that had 2 staircases and rooms that didn't have names yet because nobody had decided what they were for. Lorraine learned early what work looked like. She learned that dignity was not something handed to you. It was something you kept quietly, even when the world was not watching. Especially then. She had wanted to be a teacher. She had the marks for it, too, back in 1987 when she graduated from Llewellyn Park Secondary School, with grades that surprised even her homeroom teacher, a man named Mr. Arsenault, who had told her in October of her final year that she had a gift for explaining things to people who didn't understand them yet. But her father's illness that spring meant the money she had saved for Laurentian went to something more immediate, and by the time things stabilized, she was 23. And the moment had passed in the way that moments do when you are not paying attention to anything except surviving. She married a man named Paul Beauchamp when she was 26. He was a kind man, a quiet man, a man who drove a delivery truck and laughed at his own jokes and brought home wildflowers he'd picked from the roadside because he thought they were prettier than anything at the florist. They had a son together named Rémi, who was born with a head full of dark hair and an expression of absolute skepticism that never entirely left his face even when he grew up. Paul died of a cardiac event when Rémi was 9 years old. He was 41. He had been feeling tired for months. Everyone thought it was the long shifts. After that, Lorraine did what she had always done. She worked. She took the custodial position at Birchwood Elementary in Barrie because it was steady and it had benefits, and it was close enough to her apartment that she could get home before Rémi came back from school. She was 43 years old when she started. She had been there 11 years by the time any of this mattered. The boy's name was Owen. She noticed him first on a Thursday in late September. He was 7 years old, small for his age, with ears that stuck out slightly and a habit of chewing on the end of his pencil that the teachers were always correcting. He had been left at the school past 4 o'clock, which happened sometimes, and he had wandered into the library because the gym was locked and the hallway was cold. Lorraine was shelving books when he sat down at the corner table. He opened a picture book and held it carefully, the way children do when they are trying very hard to look like they know what they are doing. She watched him for a moment from behind the cart. He was holding the book upside down. She did not make a production of it. She simply walked over, sat down across from him, and turned the book the right way around without commenting. Then she opened her own copy of something, a worn paperback she carried in the pocket of her work jacket, and read beside him in silence for a while. After 10 minutes, she asked, "Do you want me to read some of it out loud?" He looked at her with those skeptical, 7-year-old eyes and said, "I can read." "I know you can," she said. "I like reading out loud sometimes. It helps me remember the words better." That was not entirely true, but it was kind, and it let him say yes without losing anything. They read together for 40 minutes that evening. When his grandmother came to pick him up, a small, harried woman named Patricia, who apologized twice for being late, Owen had gotten through 6 pages on his own, stumbling only on the word enormous, which Lorraine helped him sound out without circling it or underlining it or doing anything that might make him feel marked. He said goodbye to Lorraine without looking at her, But at the door, he turned back once. That was enough. He came back the following Tuesday. And the Thursday after that. By November, it was simply understood between them that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Owen would come to the library corner table after the other children had left, and Lorraine would be there, and they would read. She started bringing extra books, not from a store, she couldn't afford that, but from the Barrie Public Library on Worsley Street, where she had a card she'd had since 1998. She chose books with short chapters and strong stories, books where things happened quickly enough to keep a 7-year-old's attention tethered. She chose books where the main character faced something hard and got through it, not because they were special, but because they kept going. She chose, without ever articulating it to herself, the kinds of books she wished she had been given when she was young. Owen was a difficult reader, not because he wasn't intelligent, he was, very, but because somewhere in his first 2 years of school he had developed a deep suspicion of being wrong. And that suspicion made him cautious in a way that slowed everything down. He would rather say nothing than say the wrong word. He would rather put his pencil down than write a sentence that might be corrected. Lorraine recognized this. She had felt it herself, in different rooms, at different ages. She never corrected him out loud. When he stumbled on a word, she would say it naturally in her next sentence, folded into her own reading, so that he could hear it without it being made into a lesson. She praised the things that were true. His memory, which was excellent, his questions, which were always better than he thought they were. His patience, which she told him was a kind of intelligence that school didn't test for but should. By February, Owen was reading at a level that surprised his classroom teacher, a woman named Miss Fortier, who mentioned it at a parent-teacher conference in a tone that suggested she was not entirely sure how it had happened. Lorraine didn't know about the conference. She wasn't there for it. She was just the custodian. She did not know who Owen's mother was until the spring. She had seen the car before, a dark gray car with a government plate, which wasn't unusual near a school. She had seen the woman get out of it twice and assumed she was someone from the board, doing an inspection. The woman wore good clothes without making anything of them, which Lorraine had always thought was the mark of someone accustomed to having them. It was Owen's grandmother who told her, in April, while waiting in the parking lot. His mother is very grateful, Patricia said, for whoever has been helping him with reading. His teacher said something to her about it, and we finally figured out it was you. He's been helping himself, Lorraine said. I just sat with him. Well. Patricia looked at her for a moment. His mother would like to meet you. Lorraine said that wouldn't be necessary. She's not the kind of person who takes no for an answer easily, Patricia said, and then, as if she'd said too much, added, she's the minister. Lorraine didn't understand at first. What minister? The Minister of Education, Patricia said. For Ontario. Her name was Catherine Drummond Waite, and she had held the position for 2.5 years, which in Ontario, politics made her practically a veteran. She was 52, striking in the way that women who have been managing rooms full of people for decades tend to be, with short gray-streaked hair and an attentiveness that she deployed like a tool. She had a son who could not read well. This was not something she spoke about publicly. It was not something she was ashamed of, exactly, but it was something she carried, because she was the Minister of Education, and her son was struggling in the very system she was responsible for, and she did not know how to square that circle without making it about herself when it was supposed to be about him. Owen's father was not in the picture. He had been gone since Owen was 3, not dramatically, but completely, the way some people leave. Catherine's mother, Patricia, had moved from Kingston to Barrie to help when Catherine's schedule made consistent pickups impossible. It was a system that worked, mostly, but it had gaps. The gap on Tuesday and Thursday evenings had been filled, without anyone asking, by a 54-year-old custodian named Lorraine Beauchamp. Catherine found out in March, when Owen's teacher mentioned at conferences that his reading had improved remarkably and that she believed it was connected to some additional support he'd been receiving after school. When pressed, Miss Fortier said she didn't know who was helping him, only that Owen went to the library corner on certain evenings and came back different. Catherine had gone to the school the following Tuesday and sat in her car in the parking lot for 40 minutes, watching through the library window from a distance. She had not expected what she saw. She had expected a tutor, someone organized, someone with a system. She had not expected a woman in a gray work uniform, sitting at a corner table with her jacket pockets slightly lumpy with books, reading beside her son with the calm ease of someone who had been doing this for years and expected nothing from it. She drove home and did not sleep well. When they finally met, it was at Lorraine's request and on her terms, which Catherine respected immediately. Lorraine had said she would speak with her after her shift in the school parking lot and that it wouldn't take long. Catherine arrived in the dark gray car and waited. Lorraine came out at 4:15, still in her work clothes, carrying a thermos of coffee. She did not offer any of it to Catherine, which somehow made Catherine feel more at ease than any professional courtesy might have. "He's a good boy," Lorraine said, before Catherine could say anything. "He just needed someone to sit with him who wasn't grading him." "I know," Catherine said. "I'm grateful. I don't have words for how grateful." "You don't need to have words for it. I'd like to do something." "You're the Minister of Education," Lorraine said. "Your school board cut the library hours here 2 years ago. The library closes at 3. The kids who need the most time with books are the ones whose parents can't get there until 4 or 5. That's the thing." Catherine was quiet. "I'm not saying that to embarrass you," Lorraine said. "I'm saying it because you asked what you could do. Extended library hours stops. Staffed, not just open. Staffed, so there's someone there. That's a budget question." "I know it is," Lorraine said. "You're the one who decides the budget." She finished her coffee. She looked at Catherine Drummondwaite the way people look at other people when they're not asking anything, only stating. "I don't want a check," she added. "I didn't sit with Owen for a check. I sat with him because he was there and he needed it, and I could." "I know," Catherine said softly. "That's why I'm not offering one." They stood in the parking lot in the early April dark, 2 women who had both worked very hard to get to exactly where they were, for very different versions of where that was. "My son," Catherine said finally, "he talks about you." "Does he? He told me you said patience is a kind of intelligence that school doesn't test for." Lorraine looked at her. "That's true. I know," Catherine said. "I'm going to use it." "If that's all right, you can have it," Lorraine said, and almost smiled. "I didn't invent it." She did not expect anything to change. That was not false modesty or bitterness. It was simply what she knew from 54 years of being alive, which was that institutions moved slowly when they moved at all, and that one conversation in a parking lot with one minister, however well-intentioned, was not the same thing as a policy. She kept her Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Owen kept coming. By May, he was reading chapter books independently. Books with small print and real plots and no pictures, which he held with a proprietary satisfaction that made Lorraine feel something she couldn't name, but recognized as the closest thing to joy she'd had in a long time. She didn't tell anyone about the conversation with Catherine. There was nothing to tell, really. It had happened. She'd said what she had to say. The rest was not her department. What happened next happened in October of the following year. She was shelving books on a Wednesday morning when the principal, a careful man named Mr. Thibault, came to find her and said there was someone from the ministry asking for her. She thought at first it's about something procedural, an inspection, a form, something that needed a signature. It was a woman from the ministry's communications office, named Jess, who was young and earnest and slightly nervous, which put Lorraine on guard immediately. "The minister," Jess said, "is announcing a province-wide extended library hours initiative for elementary schools. Funded, staffed, piloting in 15 boards this academic year and expanding to all boards within 3 years." Lorraine said nothing. "She's announcing it next Thursday," Jess continued, "at Birchwood Elementary. She asked if that would be all right with you." "With me?" Lorraine said. "I don't work in the library. I clean it." She knows, Jess said. She wants you to be there when she announces it. Not on a stage, not speaking, just there. Lorraine was quiet for a long moment. The announcement references an unnamed school staff member, Jess added carefully, who demonstrated what was possible when someone simply stays past the end of their shift. She's not naming me. She asked if you wanted to be named. She said it was entirely your choice. Lorraine thought about it. No, she said. No name. Okay. But I'll be there. She stood in the back of the gymnasium on a Thursday in late October, in a room full of journalists and school board officials and a cluster of students who had been quietly arranged near the front by their teachers. And she watched Catherine Drummondwaite step up to a microphone and speak about libraries and hours, and funding, and the specific, irreplaceable thing that happens when a child who is struggling is given a quiet space and someone willing to sit in it with them. Catherine did not look at Lorraine during the announcement. They had agreed, without saying so, that this was not about the two of them. But at the end, as the cameras and the officials and the board representatives moved toward each other in the particular dance of people managing optics, Owen came through the crowd from where he had been sitting with his class. He was 8 now. He had grown a little. He still had the ears and the skeptical expression, and the habit of chewing on the end of his pencil. He walked up to Lorraine and said, without preamble, the way children state things that are simply true. My mom did it because of you. Your mom did it, Lorraine said, because it was the right thing to do. Owen considered this with the seriousness he brought to most things. She said, you're the same, he said, that you both did it because it was right. Lorraine looked at him for a moment. Your mother's a smart woman, she said. I know, Owen said, with the particular resignation of a child who has always known this and found it occasionally inconvenient. She tells me that too. Lorraine laughed. It was a real laugh, the sudden kind, the kind that comes before you have time to decide whether you are laughing or not. She had not laughed like that in a while. Her son Rémi found out what had happened not from Lorraine, but from a news article that a colleague forwarded him, one of those brief human interest pieces that ran below the fold on the CBC website before being shared several thousand times in a week. The article was about the announcement. It mentioned, briefly, an unnamed custodian at an unnamed school, whose after-hours reading sessions had been the quiet origin of a provincial initiative that would eventually affect the library access of more than 400,000 children across Ontario. Rémi was 31. He worked as a structural engineer in Hamilton. He called her on a Sunday. Mom, he said, was that you? The article doesn't name anyone, she said. Was it you? She was quiet for a moment. There are a lot of custodians in Ontario, she said. Mom, yes, she said, it was me. He didn't say much after that. He was not a man of many words, her son, which was something she recognized in him and had always privately considered one of his better qualities. But she could hear something in the silence on the other end of the phone that she understood. Dad would have thought it was funny, he said finally, that you ended up teaching anyway. She sat with that for a moment. He would have, she agreed. He would have said the universe has a sense of humor. It does, Rémi said. It really does. She hung up and sat in her kitchen in Barrie with the last of a cup of tea that had gone slightly cold. In the apartment she'd lived in for 14 years. In the city she had come to almost by accident and stayed in because staying was what she knew how to do. Outside, it was October, and the maples on her street had gone deep red and gold in the particular way they did in this part of Ontario, the way that still surprised her every year even though she had seen it 54 times and knew perfectly well it was coming. There was something about that, the way the same surprise could keep arriving. She rinsed out her cup. She had work in the morning, but on Tuesday, the library would be open until 5 o'clock. A staff member would be there. A real one, paid, trained, someone whose job it now was to sit in that room with children who needed more time with words. And if Lorraine happened to stop by on her way home, just to shelve a few things, just to tidy the corner table, that was simply part of the job. The children who were there would not know the difference. That was exactly the point.